At least it's hump day. We're almost there. It's kind of weird. I don't see you guys until halfway through the week. Okay. I'll give it one more minute. Okay, I think we can get started. So welcome everyone to our third lecture now. I want to start just by getting us prepared for what we're going to be doing later on. So first thing is just for attendance. If you guys can all change your Zoom name to your last name, comma, first name, that can make it a lot easier for our TAs when they're marking your attendance. So we haven't been marking attendance last week, but we're starting to do that this week. If you want to know how to actually do that, you click the participants button in the control bar, and then you find your name on that list, and then you can choose more, and then there will be an option to rename yourself. So if you guys can take a second to do that, and then the other thing I want you guys to do is to also take a minute to just boot up your Cloud9 IDE. Hopefully you should know how to find that from doing the stuff earlier in the setup. But if you need any help, let me know. You just need to find the classroom in AWS Educate and go to the console and then open up Cloud9. So we're going to be using your IDE later on when we go through some coding demos. And it usually takes a minute to boot up. So doing it now will just make sure that you can jump right in later on in class. So I'm going to give you all a minute to do the naming as well as the workspace. I see a lot of people have already changed their names, so thank you for doing that. Oh, Nicholas said you can also just hover over your name. Cool, that's easier. For anybody who just joined in, we are doing two things to get prepped for a class. One is change your Zoom name to last name, comma, first. This will make it easier for attendance. And you can do that by hovering over your name, clicking three dots, and then there's an option to rename. The other thing we're doing is booting up our Cloud9 IDEs so you guys can do some coding later on. I'll give one more minute for everybody to do this. All right, we're gonna keep going. If you're still doing this, it's okay. But we're just gonna go into like the logistics and stuff like that. So if it is your first day of class, that's totally fine. Welcome. And you can review the first two lectures on YouTube. They're posted on Canvas, and also make sure that you finish any of the assignments. For everybody else, you should be done with one, the survey, and I'm looking forward to just reading through all of your answers and getting to know you. And then also the Cloud9 setup, which we're using later on today. And we've also started office hours for the week and all the coming weeks. Today, there's office hours from 3 to 4:30 with Anshul, as well as 6 to 7 with David. So if you guys want to just talk to your TAs or get any help on the homework, then you can show up there. And then finally, I posted the Project 1 specs. You should see them on Canvas. And I also set the due dates to February 8th and February 16th. So hopefully I tried to push it back as much as I could just so you guys have as much buffer room for those two. So make sure that you take a second to read into it and everything later on after class. Cool. Let's dive in. And for those of you who joined a little bit later, the two things that we did right before earlier in class was change your Zoom name to last name comma first for attendance purpose, and then set up your Cloud9 workspace, have it ready to go so you can code later on. All right, so today we're going to be going through our classic intro and then talking about using the command line, using the Linux command line as well as the Bash kind of command language. And I'm going to go through some demos, and then I'm going to give you some independent work time to start our third homework assignment. And then finally, hopefully if we have time, I'm just going to introduce you to the Flask framework that we're going to be using for the projects and everything in general. So before that, though, I wanted to give a Zoom poll. Last class, we were talking about the different sides of the stack and like different components in an app, the front end, back end, things like that. And I wanted to get a sense of like what people are gravitating towards, if anything. Maybe you guys are more excited about like the UI or handling data, things like that, just for my own interest. And also, these Zoom polls are going to be what counts for your attendance. It's a lot easier to download a report of like everybody who showed up to class based on who voted in the poll. So please make sure you vote just for the sake of attendance either way. All right, seeing about 2/3 have voted. %. We're almost there. 90%. Three more people. Anybody who didn't get the chance to vote, hopefully you can see the poll. Yeah, Charles. Somebody has chosen that in the last few classes, so I put that there for a reason. I know a lot of you could be feeling that. Okay. Anybody? Three more people? No? I'm going to end the poll then. All right. Here are the results. Looks like about a little more than half of the people were interested in full stack. I've seen this from the last two sections as well. That's overwhelmingly been the answer that people choose. And you know, there obviously doesn't have to be an answer right now, like what you're more interested in. And then we have a few people talking about front end as well as a little less about back end. Obviously, you're going to need to know like all of these things in order to do your engineering job, but there are specializations and things like that that you can jump into. I personally am more into the front end and client side, but even then, I've had to do a lot of back end work on the same team. Cool. Let me just see. Sujin, you're asking about Cloud9 setup. If it's making you do the setup again, that should be weird. Make sure that you're logged into the right account and everything like that. It should already be there, but it's fine if you don't have it set up. You can just follow along today. Okay. So why do we care? Shahid, you said you didn't get the poll question. That's okay. I think maybe it wasn't showing up for some people, and we can look into that later. And Mervin gave a good suggestion. Just make sure you're in the right classroom for finding your Cloud9. Cool. So why do we care today? What do you guys think? Why do we care about learning how to use the command line, how to use Bash, things like that? Why is that important to you, if at all?
Hello? Hello?
Anybody? Charles said Bash is really good for automation. Yeah, so, oh, sorry. My volume was down, so I couldn't actually hear. Whoever said that, do you want to say it again?
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay. Yeah, so the reason we want to learn like Bash and stuff like that is because usually most companies uh they use like some kind of terminal interface and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, John. I think you're going to see it used a lot at companies just in general because a lot of times the operating system is like Linux or something is used really often in the industry. Charles was saying it's good for automation. It can make you like really productive as an engineer if you know how to work your command line really well. To make powerful and quick scripts, Tyler, yeah, exactly. You can automate things, you can customize things, and have your own scripts to do things faster. It does look cool when you have like that neon green code in your black terminal. Then you feel like one of those hackers. So that's true. Kelly, you use that as your job for anything. Yeah, exactly. You're gonna need it on the job, and it's a good foundation, like Milad said, for a toolbox. I think you guys covered it pretty well. I was saying similar things. You're going to use it a lot on the job. I know I do for anything from installing libraries, running code, accessing files. Like John was saying, like it's used a lot at companies, especially Linux as an operating system. You're going to see being used a lot in the industry. Also, you're going to be just needing it in class for all the same sort of things I was mentioning. Your Cloud9 terminal will be a much easier way to interface with your code than using the UI often. And we're just going to be covering the basics. I'm definitely no master at the command line. I just Google everything whenever I need to figure something out. But I just want to make sure that we're all at least starting on the same page. Yeah, yeah. So Google is just the best way to go about it, Marco. All right, so let's give an overview. Unix and Linux. Unix is a family of operating systems designed in the 1970s for multitasking. Multitasking is like a fancy way of saying you can execute multiple programs or processes at the same time. Um, it's also the basis of Mac OS for those of you who have Macs. And then Linux is a free open source operating system that's based on Unix, and that was released in the 90s. Linux is now one of the world's most used operating systems. I think partly because it's free, partly open source, things like that. And you're going to see it a lot with web server computers. And then Linux is the basis for things like Chrome OS for those of you who have Chromebooks, as well as our Cloud9 environment, as you remember choosing Amazon Linux when you set it up. Unix was actually made in over at Bell Labs, which is like pretty close to NJIT's campus, like a 20-minute drive or something. So that's just a fun fact. And then Bash is going to be the programming language that you use within these Linux-based or Unix-based operating systems to make any sorts of commands. And then finally, with terminology, a command line interface, you might also hear people saying CLI or terminal or shell or console. There's so many different ways to say these things. They might be slightly different in their exact definition, but I'd say they're pretty interchangeable. And it's going to be some pre-installed application on your computer, which helps you manage files and do things. Um, so yeah. And then within the command line, one useful thing I was talking about was installing packages. Package installers can be like, you can think of them as app stores to help you install different types of software. I'm sure you've heard of some of them. There's like Homebrew. In this class, NPM and pip are going to be the main ones that we're using. Um, and also keep an eye out. We're going to be doing two demos today. One of them is going to involve installing this package C9, which helps you open files from the terminal more easily. Cool. So we're going to do things a little bit differently today. I basically pre-recorded 2 demos where I'm going through terminal and explaining how to do things like bash commands and things like that. For some of you, this may already be easy. You've done this in the past. Uh, for 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 that, you can just like let this be a refresher and just follow along. For other people, though, you might be new to it or not that comfortable with it. Maybe it's been a while. So for those, I would suggest you can follow along if you can. Pull up your Cloud9 IDE now, and you can kind of follow the commands that I'm doing on your own computer just to see that everything is working. So if you can do that, please do. Otherwise, if it's hard to like multitask and have multiple windows open at the same time, then you can just follow along in the video directly, and then I'll give you time to do things on your own later on in class. So let me just pull up the video. Oh yeah, and the reason I'm doing a video is just because I often screw up while trying to do things like coding, as all of us do. So I figured it's just a better way to save us time, so you're not just watching me debug half the class. Okay, I'm gonna pull up the video. Give me a second. So everybody, you can just chat me if you have questions while the video is playing, and I'll answer them in chat. Otherwise, if there's a lot of questions, I can pause as well. Okay, just to test, can you guys hear this? So today we're going to be talking about the command line or terminal. Okay, awesome. Let's restart and let's go ahead and watch the first demo. So today we're going to be talking about the command line or terminal or bash shell, whatever you want to call it, and how you can tell your computer what to do with some simple commands which help you use your Cloud9 workspace more easily. When you open your Cloud9, you start with this left view where you see some folders and stuff that you have, this bottom pane where you have your terminal, and then the middle pane, which would show your files. I'm just gonna increase the size of the bottom pane as well as the left pane because we're gonna be focusing on the terminal screen as well as how that translates to your kind of folders UI view that you see on the left. Now, when we start out, we are in Numan's CS490 workspace, which has this kind of path called something something environment. And if you see here in the terminal, these blue letters here are going to tell you what your current directory or folder you're in is called. So here you can see environment, which matches up to environment over here. Now, to do a command, you simply just type something in. So I'm going to start with the most basic command, ls, and then press enter. ls stands for list stuff, and it basically just shows you whatever files and folders are in your current directory, which you can see here just by clicking this drop down, and you can see, so hello world, project one, and so on. Now, what if you want to click into another directory? So I don't want to be in this environment folder. I want to be in project one. What you can do is use the command cd or change directory, and then the name of the folder. So project one, you press enter, and now you'll notice there was no output, but this right here, this current directory changed from environment to project one. Now I want to see what is in project one. So here you could obviously click this drop down, but here I will use ls. And now you can see all of these files and folders that are included in here. Now to go back up, you can use cd dot dot. This dot dot basically represents moving up to the parent folder. So now you see we've gone to environment. So another way of doing things, there's this concept of an absolute path and a relative path. When I was using these dot dots, that I'm basically saying relative to my current folder, I want to be one level higher. You can also basically say cd tilde, which is basically your home or a kind of starting point directory, which will be represented right here, and then a slash, and then basically anything you want to go into. So I could go into environment slash project one slash and then maybe static. So I'm not going one folder in at a time, but I can use this absolute path here to directly jump right into this static folder. And you could do the same thing by going relatively through within each folder, but this can be a faster way to do it. Now, the relative paths, you can also use this sort of dot dot notation that I was showing. So now if I press dot dot once, then I'm going into project one. But if I do slash dot dot twice, then I will be in the environment folder. And maybe after that, if I press enter, you will see that I'm back in the environment. So that's kind of the basic way of how relative and absolute paths go. One last thing you can do is pwd, which prints your working directory. This is the full file path for where you are currently located, which is kind of represented here as well. Now I have all this crap that I've written on the screen. What if you just want to make it go away? You can just say clear, enter, and then the screen is clear. So next thing we want to do is make a folder or a file. To make a folder, you're going to use the command mkdir, which stands for make directory, and then the name of your folder. So let's say lecture 3. I pressed enter. How do I know that the folder is there? Well, in the UI, you can see here that lecture 3 has now appeared, wasn't there before, but you can also do ls, and now from listing stuff, you see lecture 3 right there. Now, what if you want to make a new file? We made a new folder. To do that, you basically use the command called touch, and then you're going to include the name of your file. So maybe I'm making a Python file. I'm going to say demo.py. And as you can see right here on the right as well, demo.py shows up. But to confirm, if I do ls, we have this right here. There's also this concept of hidden files. So right now, there's some other files that start with a dot, and you can't see them because normally they're not going to show up in the UI. Let's make a hidden file first. So you can do touch, I'm going to do dot hidden.py. So as you can see, nothing actually showed up on the left. There was no new file added to the UI. And if I do ls, I don't see an actual hidden.py here. So in order to see every file that's in this directory, not just the ones that are not hidden, you'll do ls.a to see all the files. Now you can see you're seeing a lot more files than earlier, bashrc, c9, as well as your hidden.py file. So this is going to be useful in the next demo when we talk more about bashrc files. Now, we've done some kind of creation of files and folders. Let's also do moving. So what if I want to take my hidden file and move it into my lecture 3 folder? So you're going to use mv move, and then the name of your file, and then where you want it to go. So I want it to go to the lecture 3 folder. Now let's see what happened. First, let's make sure that this file is no longer in our current directory because we moved it. You can see hidden is now gone. Now let's confirm that it actually went to lecture 3. So cd, change directory. And then if I don't feel like typing lecture 3, I could actually just press L. So the first letter maybe of where I want to go, and then tab. So this is called tab complete. When you press tab, then it'll automatically find if anything matches what you started writing out, and it'll complete that word for you. So it's a lot faster to go around using your tab complete. So I've moved into lecture 3. Now I'll do ls-a, and I can see hidden py is now here where I had moved it to. Cool. I'm going to clear all this. Next thing I want to do is just say, like, so Bash is kind of a programming language in some sense. What's the hello world for it? You know, in Python, you're just going to do something like print hello world. That obviously doesn't work in Bash. It has its own syntax. So here you see syntax error. How you do it here is you use the word echo and then your string, echo hello world, and then prints to the output that same string, hello world. Simple as that. You can get even more interesting though here and actually chain commands. So something that's meant to be output here and by the terminal can then be piped, is what we say, into another place. So I'm going to do echo hello world, and I'm going to use this operator, this greater than sign, and I'm going to basically write this output into a file itself. So right now we have our, let's see. Well, first, let's see what files we even have here. We don't have any left yet, so I'm going to create a quick file, demo.txt. It's there now. So back to what I was doing, I'm going to take this echo output, and I'm actually going to pipe it into the demo.txt file. So basically what this is doing is it's taking that output and writing it into this file. So how do I actually view the file? There's a few ways to do it. One, of course, is that you could simply just click on the file and open it up in your Cloud9. But if you want to see it in your terminal itself, you can use cat and then the file name, and then it'll just print whatever is in that file itself. So when I did that, you can see that hello world was written into this file. You can also use the two greater than signs in order to add on more to a file. So adding one more line, and I'm going to use two greater than signs and move it to the same file. Now, what would we expect here? We would expect that when we do cat demo.txt, we see hello world from before, but also adding one more line. So one greater than sign is to kind of replace the file with this text. Two greater than is just to add on to it. Now, final thing that we can do with bash is just chain commands. And how we can do that is we can use, in one sense, we can use a semicolon, very similar to JavaScript or Java that we're already used to. And you could do something like this. So echo hello num1, and then we're gonna add it to our same file. Then you add a semicolon, and I want to actually print out the contents of that file. So without having to do two separate commands, I can use the semicolon and do it all in one. And now you can see in the output, we have hello num1. There's one more way to do that. And if I want to pull up a command that I just ran and not have to rewrite the whole thing, you can press the up arrow. And if you keep pressing it, you can go through the history of what you've written. So I'm just going to press up once so I can go to this. And instead of the semicolon, I'm going to put double and. That basically says if the first command is successful, it'll return a 1 or something, and then it'll know that it can do the second command, but only if it's successful. So now I'm going to echo hello num1, and what would we expect if I run this line? I'm adding this onto the existing file, so when you press enter, you should be seeing two hello num1s, and that's what we see here. So that's kind of a high level of how to use bash, and let me know if you have any questions. All right. How was that for you guys? How was the pace? Did it feel too slow, too fast, just right? Okay. Good pace I'm hearing from AJ, Sujin, Mun. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. I'm glad to hear. Hopefully that gave you a reminder or refresher or you learned something. Let me get the slides back up. Cool. So I just put this cheat sheet here, which just has all the basic commands you would need. So you can reference this later in the slides. Now I want to move on to getting a little bit more complicated. So when everything that we've done so far in the command line, unless we're like changing files that exist, nothing is going to be permanent. Whatever commands we're running are just within that session itself. And we would lose that if we opened up the session again. So the way we can kind of make things more permanent and save some logic for later is basically to put it in a file like any language. And because Bash is tightly integrated with Linux, there's some special files, and one of them is called the bash rc file that the system uses. So the bash rc file basically it's this shell script that is run whenever you start a new interactive session, like on your terminal. So whatever you put in there, that's going to be able to set some settings for your environment, some preferences, things like that we're going to go into. And a key thing when you're playing with this bash rc file is you always have to source it. So this source command is telling Linux that there's been some changes and you need to take them into account. If you don't do that, then you're not going to be able to change the file and then see those changes immediately. So we're going to jump right into the next demo, actually, and talk about bash rc. Okay, let me just pull it up. And yeah, for those of you who had like Cloud9 issues, it happens every now and then. It kind of sucks, but you just have to reload and it should start up again. All right. Okay, you guys ready? We're going to start the next one now. And again, let me know just in the chat if you have questions during. All right, so now we're going to be working on some more complicated and customized commands that we can do in Bash. You might find yourself often typing out the same commands over and over again, and this can feel inefficient, especially when you're working with version control. Writing out those git commands can often take a long time. So hopefully this can actually help with your productivity as well. The key to all of this is the bash rc file. And this file basically saves a bunch of stuff for us to be able to use in our terminal over and over again. And that includes things like custom commands. So let's start with where this file is. It should be in your home directory, which you should find by just doing cd with nothing after that. And it's a hidden file, so we actually have to do ls-a in order to find it. So as you can see, .bashrc is right there. Now to actually open it, it can be useful to have this package called C9. So you can install it by npm install -g C9. So that's installed. And now you can just type C9 and then .bashrc. And this actually opens it into our text editor here. This whole file, super long, lots of stuff. I don't actually know what all of this is. You're going to have it too, and there's no need to really look into it. But just know that it's all important stuff. And when you're editing this file, just add on to the end, but don't actually change anything that's written itself. So let's start with aliases. Aliases are basically just shortcut commands to make typing things out faster. So instead of typing out ls-a every time, maybe I'm tired of that and I just want a command called la. Now what you do is you create that and you set it equal to the actual command ls-a, and now you have an alias. So you can't just use it already. If I do that, you'll see command is not found. What you need to do is first source it, which basically tells your terminal to that there have been updates to this file and to reflect those and get the most updated version. So I'll do source and then the file name, which is .bashrc. Now that we've sourced it, we should expect that when you type LA, then everything is shown, not just your files that aren't hidden. And that kind of reflects what you would see if you did ls-a. Cool. So that's aliases. Another thing you can do to get even more complicated are using functions. So this is a language, so we can do some pretty cool stuff with this. So maybe I want to be able to make a file and then open it at the same time. So we could do touch open, or I can actually simplify it to just TO. And this is a command that we're writing, which will first create a new file using touch. And I use $1, which basically is saying you're going to have some arguments when after this TO, like something like this. And $1 is referring to the first argument after the command. So I'm assuming that first argument is going to be the file name that I want to make. So I'll do touch $-1, $1, and then I'm going to do C9 $1 in order to actually open up that same file. So that's a function. Now let's source it. Once again, can't forget that. And then if I do to demo bash.py, then what should we expect? It'll create this file, doesn't exist yet, and then it'll actually open it. So here we see now it's opened it up into the terminal. Awesome. So now let's do one more function, get a little bit more complicated. Say that you're in like a deep folder. I'm going to go environment, project 1, and then I'm going to go into, what else is there? Let's go into static, styles. So I'm super far in here. Maybe I'm wanting to go back to project 1, but I don't have to do cd ... /... and all of that. So we have this up function that could take you up there faster. The way you can do that is you actually have for loops in this language too. And I don't actually know any of the syntax, but I'm just copying something that I've found. And what you can do is for I in, and then you're going to have a sequence going from 1 up to an argument. And that argument is going to be a number saying how many levels up should we be going. So we have our for loop, and then it's going to say do cd. So until we get up to the level we want to, you're going to keep doing cd ... which goes one level up. So here we have our function. Let's see. Syntax error. Let's see. Maybe I have to do that. That's weird. One sec. Let me just reference. Let's see. I think I did it right. Yeah. So I forgot that I actually need to put a done here as well. And that should work. So you don't see an error anymore here. Cool. So let's source it one more time. And now if I do up to, then what do we expect? It should do cd ... once to go to static, and then twice to go to project 1. And that should be where I end up. And here we go, project 1. Cool. So these are some basic things you can do with your bash RC, and you'll work more on it in your homework as well. All right. Darsha, looks like you had some errors. Yeah, make sure you save. Run the shortcut like Control S or Command S in the editor itself, and do that first before you source. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that while you're trying to do it? Yeah, I forgot to mention this, but all of this is going to be posted to YouTube, so you can go through the demos. The demos themselves are also going to be posted to YouTube separately, so you can look through those later. And they're actually on YouTube already from the last classes. All right. Any other questions? I will give the link. It is currently posted on your assignment, but I will also include it on like the Canvas homepage. Yep. All right. So one thing I'm just going to quickly mention, not for that long, is Vim. Some of you might love it. Some of you might hate it. I know people have different opinions about these sorts of text editors. Vim is basically a very lightweight text editor that you can run directly in the command line. So you don't need like that Cloud9 UI or VS Code, Sublime, whatever else that you're used to using normally. It's built right into that terminal and into the OS. So that makes it more optimized and efficient when you're using it. I personally, I'm not a Vim fan, but I know a lot of people are. I think it can be really useful once you know how to use it and once you know how to do like the different shortcuts and things like that. Then you can get really, really productive actually with writing code in there. Uh, AJ and Sunny, I see you're talking about Emacs. I haven't used it, so I don't really have any feelings about it. I think I'm personally just like a VS Code fan because I use it a lot at work. But everybody has different ways. Marco, you're saying, I know, yeah. Yeah. Command line editors can give a bit of a migraine. I think it's a lot of getting used to it. Some people like Emacs more. Why do you like Emacs more? Use Vim during 288. Yeah, I'm sure you did. C9 editor is nice enough. It has like some debugging, error messages, things like that. Okay, Emacs is more like Notepad++. I haven't honestly used, I've mainly just used the main like mainstream VS Code, Sublime, Atom. And I used Vim in college when I was forced to, but I didn't really like it. Huh, good to know. I'll look into it. So I'm not going to teach you guys how to use Vim. I'm going to leave it up to you if you're interested in going down that road. There's this really great tutorial I've done called on openvim.com, which helps you figure out how to do all the different commands and move around. One of the hardest things can be just to like leave Vim. I know I've been stuck on that a few times. So they'll just tell you how to do everything. You can also use Vim Tutor, which is another tutorial directly in your terminal. Microsoft Edit, okay. Yeah, so I will hear the resources for it, but you can do it if you want. And you can let me know if you have questions while you're learning about it on your own time. All right, so now I want to give you some independent work time. We we kind of went through some things in the demo, but now you can play with it on your own without anything else going on at the same time. Uh, the I want you guys to go to Canvas and go to assignments, and you'll see homework 3 there. It's going to be just kind of working with bash RC and some custom like aliases and things like that. This is going to be due next class, but you can start it right now and just chat me or talk to me if you have any questions, and I'll be right here. So I'll give you 15 minutes. We can say we'll come back at 1:30, so 17 minutes. Um, and yeah, in the meantime, just let me know if you have questions through all of that. One thing to note actually, before you guys go, the last question is going to be about installing Flask. This is something that we're going to be covering after this work time, so in the next set of slides. So you don't have to do that. You can stop once you get to the last question. Mervin, I see you gave a resource, vimadventures.com. That sounds cool. I haven't tried it, but that sounds like a good thing for everybody if you're interested. Cool. Go forth, do your thing. All right, we're going to start back up. So come back to Zoom. Okay. So hopefully you guys got a chance to start, finish, doesn't matter, at least do something. And now we're going to pivot over to Flask and frameworks in general. And I'm just going to introduce that for the end of this class. Shanil, you can submit if you're done the last question for installing Flask, but otherwise, if you haven't, then hold off, and it'll automatically save the work that you've done so far on the other questions. Cool. Okay, so I want to start and just talk about frameworks at a high level. So a framework is basically just code that provides some sort of structure and makes it easier for a developer to create an application. And Tyler, we'll get to your question about the installation later on. The key word I want to talk about with framework is structure. Um, it's that's kind of the main thing that it's doing here. It's showing you how you can build your app in a certain kind of architecture or form that they've determined. And this is kind of different from a library. In a framework, they have the structure and you're kind of placing your code within that structure. In a library, you're just kind of using some tool or helper function, but you have full reign over like what exactly you're doing. It doesn't have to necessarily adhere to a certain structure. So why should we use specifically web frameworks at all? What's the point of them? Basically, there's going to be a lot of repetitive and boring code that you're going to have to write in order to build a web server. And this is going to handle a lot of that for you so that you don't need to write all that stuff out. So it just makes developing these applications and scaling them a lot easier with less code and less time needed on your side. And some of the things that your framework, your web framework is going to be handling is one, working with HTTP requests and responses. So if you remember from last class when we were talking about that client server architecture and the client giving that request and then getting response back, that whole sort of thing, that low level kind of inner workings is going to be handled. Another thing is routing the URLs to an appropriate handler. So we were talking about like your user might go to iwantgroceries.com or something like that. So that URL, somehow your web server needs to know based on exactly what that URL is, what specific code should I return, what logic should I do. So that's another thing. Another is interacting with databases. So if you remember on the server side, you're going to have this web server, which is like a computer, and it's somehow going to be connected to a database that's being stored somewhere else. Now, that can get a little bit tricky. So usually a framework is going to have some useful libraries or APIs to do that with less code. Another thing is user authorization. So how can you make sure that your client who's making a request to your server is the authorized user that you want for whatever reason? And then finally, formatting output. So your web server is returning some response with some data. It could either be JSON, which is just going to have like your actual like kind of data objects, or it could be HTML, which is your physical web page that the user is seeing. So how to format that in the best way. So that should be pretty self-explanatory on like why we need to use it. It obviously makes our life easier. The next question that I want you guys to always be thinking about, regardless of what technology we're dealing with, is the trade-offs and like which one should we use? Which technology should we use and how to evaluate them? When it comes to web frameworks, here are just some basic considerations to make when you're choosing one. The first one is ease or ease of use. Each framework is going to be written in a specific programming language and require you to use that programming language. And some programming languages are going to be easier for certain developers. So it'll just be easier to use. Another thing is flexibility. So because a framework is providing structure, it's telling you how to build your application. It has some opinion, so we say how opinionated it is, on the best design or architecture for how to be doing things. And if it's more opinionated, then it's going to be less flexible and it's going to have a certain way to do things. That could be good just because maybe you align with that opinion, maybe you align with that sort of structure and you think that's how I want to build my app. Well, then that's awesome because that framework is going to help you get there and you won't have to do much. On the other case, maybe you don't exactly know yet, maybe it's going to change, or you want to keep it open. Then having something that's more flexible, has less opinions, only it's more bare bones, can be the better approach. Another thing is similar to how we're talking about like bare bones and opinions. Sometimes frameworks are going to come with a lot of different like libraries and helpful things. So this is kind of the batteries included approach. And that can be really great if you know, like, I need to interact with the database, this database specifically. So if it has a library to do all of that for you, then that saves you time. But maybe you have specific libraries that you like using, and you don't want to be tunneled into a certain way or a certain thing that you have to use. Then the more flexible or the do-it-yourself versions without those libraries let you choose what you want to do. And then finally, this one maybe you don't think about as often is user friendliness of the framework. So how is the documentation for it? The first thing that you do when you want to learn about how to use the framework is go to their website, see the docs, see like that quick start tutorial type of thing. So how well are they documenting everything and how easy is it to pick that up and learn online? Also, like how many people, how many developers are using this framework? The more people that are using the framework means the more people are asking questions on Stack Overflow or on other things online. So if you have some error, then you can assume that somebody else has had that error, and then it makes the development process a lot easier. And I included a bunch of web frameworks here. We can focus on the bottom row. Those are like the actual like web server frameworks. So Ruby on Rails, Express, which is based on Node.js, Django, which is another Python framework. And then the top row is more like client-side framework. So that's not exactly what we're talking about right now, but that'll include Angular and React and Ember. So I mean, in this class, you're not going to get a choice for the first two projects, at least. We are going with Flask. Flask is going to be a web framework that is built on Python. It does all the things we're talking about, like routing, fetching, HTML for like the layout that it's returning in the response. And the Hello World app, or like the most basic form of a Flask app, is only like 10 lines of code. So it's super easy as for beginners. And another thing is you'll see in the documentation, Flask advertises itself as a micro framework. The micro basically just means it abstracts very little for you. So if you're thinking about in the last slide, when we're talking about like flexibility and like batteries included, that sort of thing, Flask is going to fall much more on the flexible side and the do-it-yourself side. So they're not going to have all these different helpful libraries and things for doing things. It's very bare, very basic. And if you want to build on things, then you have to do it yourself. So based on what you know about Flask, I want to ask you all, why do you think that we're choosing Flask for the first two projects in this classroom? What are some of those trade-offs or considerations that you think might make it worth it? Felix said, easy to use. Taslim said, language familiarity, for sure. Yeah, it's based off of Python. So a lot of you guys probably know Python already from your earlier requirements and intro classes. So you know the language. Donovan said bare bones. Yeah, so why can bare bones be a useful thing? He hasn't said allows us to build skills if we want to add more. So yeah, it's not handling a lot. That's true. Better understanding of what is happening without it being too complex. Yeah, if it's providing all these libraries and things like that, then you might lose sight of like the very core of what a web server is and what's needed. And you might get lost in all of that crap that they have, the bells and whistles that they're adding on the side. Felix says you have more control over what to use. Yeah, because it doesn't have an opinion. I'm not showing you exactly one way to go about things, and you have some sort of opinion that you can make yourself. And then John said the same thing about like having less assumptions. Forces you to learn instead of fancy functions. Yeah. So if you have to kind of figure out which libraries to use and things like that, then you might be thinking more than you would have to with something else like Django. And then Taslim, yeah, I think what you said like about the workings of HTTP, I agree, and I think that you'll probably see in any web framework because they're all going to be handling that at the core. But that's a good reason to use a web framework. Cool. I think you guys pretty much covered it. Python, it's very simple, no bells and whistles, and then it's very flexible. So you might remember I quickly showed this diagram last class, and we were working on slowly drawing this out when we were talking about our grocery app. It's a very basic client-server architecture, nothing fancy. But I want to know if you guys can tell me, based on what you know so far, where Flask fits into this diagram and like what part of it, what section of it. Backend, Felix, yeah, that's true. So Flask is we're going to be working on the backend with Flask. And then web server, yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what it is. It's that web server, and it's going to be taking in some sort of HTTP request and then giving back a response. Even though it doesn't directly do stuff on the client on the front end, you are going to be using Flask to like write HTML files, which is going to be then seen on the front end. So in a way, we are doing stuff on the client as well. Cool. Yep, pointed it right to the web server. Now, in the final minutes of class, I wanted us to try installing Flask together, and you guys can let me know if you're having issues. I know there's all sorts of there's like a tree of different ways that you can run into errors. So we can all help each other out right now for the next like 5 minutes. So here are some of the commands that should work. One of these should be working in the end. The one that worked for me was the second one, sudo pip install Flask. That just helps you go around like any permission issues and have like full scope. So if you can get out your terminal, try starting with sudo pip install Flask, see what happens. And then if you have errors, then we can start talking about those.
Quick question. Should we be in the environment directory for these commands to work, or?
I think you can be wherever you want, but yeah, do it from the environment. Should we upgrade? Sunny, I don't think you need to upgrade. Everything should work without it. If you did upgrade though, or you wanted to for whatever reason, then that's totally fine and it'll still work. I'm including this link here for those who are having issues with pip. And this doc should help you in going through that. It's the same thing that's on the slide, just so you can click it.
Professor, I installed the pip install Flask, and what we have to do, the take screenshot and uploading the quiz or not?
Yeah, exactly. So in the quiz in the last section, I said you can run this command, which will just tell you what version of Flask you have. And that confirms that you've downloaded it. So just run that and take a screenshot of the output. Sunny's asking, how do we replace pip with pip3? No, I simply meant just like if you were writing pip install Flask, then just write pip3 install Flask instead. So
Professor, at the end of the PIP installation, they say that you should consider upgrading via the PIP install dash dash upgrade PIP. So we can do that upgrade.
Yeah, I think you can. I don't know if you really need to or not, but if you want to, then you can go ahead and do that. Let me pull this up. The link that I included in the chat, that might help you out in case you run into issues, just to see like what version of Python you have, and then how to see what version of pip you have, how to upgrade pip, and everything like that. So you can follow along there if you want to upgrade. Let's see, Marco, you're asking screenshot we're uploading should be displaying. Yeah, displaying the Flask version. I don't actually know which Flask version. Let me see what I have on mine. I just kind of wanted a confirmation that you have Flask, but it looks like from what Akash said, it's okay if the hello world's not working. You might have not done the right port, which we were going to get into the next class. So it's okay if you don't have the right, if it's not working. It shouldn't work. 1.1.2. Okay, let me see what I have. I think it should end up being the same one for everyone. Tyler, if you've installed Flask and you're done, then you're good to go. Yeah. And if you didn't do it in class, that's okay. It's a part of homework anyway. Sunny version of pip, that's okay. I think we care about the Flask version, but the pip one is just the package installer. Yep, thanks Albert. Thanks Tyler. Benjamin, I just wanted you to run the command that's given in question 5 or 6, the last one, and then just take a screenshot of like that command and the output on the terminal. Flask is 1.1.2. That sounds right. I think you're good to go. No problem, Benjamin. And thanks, Felix. He included the command right there in the chat. Charles, you're just going to upload that screenshot in the last question. So there's going to be an option to choose a file. And you can upload that. Yazin, yeah, that's okay if you upgraded pip. I guess that's when you would need to use pip3. No worries. Have a good day, Felix. Oh my gosh, Andrew, I've been doing that. I keep doing Control W. It's so annoying. We're gonna just have to learn to not click that anymore. Thanks, Sheila. Thanks, Benjamin. Charles, let me see. It should show up, but maybe there's something wrong. All right. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, have a good day. See you Friday. See you Friday. Take care. Bye, Ashley. Bye, Milad. Bye, Nuja. Bye, Desriana. Akash, yeah, you can just close the window and it'll automatically shut down the Cloud9 in like 30 minutes. See you all. Bye, Donovan. Bye, Sunny, Shahid, Prabhat, Irvin. And I'm staying back if anybody has questions for 10 minutes. So